If you've never lived in a neighborhood with an HOA, let me tell you something. They're not just about keeping lawns trimmed and houses looking pretty. They're about control, power, and some folks, they take that way too seriously. I learned that the hard way. It started on a breezy Saturday morning in late spring. The kind of day where the sun hits just right, the air smells like fresh-cut grass, and the neighborhood feels picture-perfect. I was in my driveway, coffee in one hand, hose in the other, washing down my pride and joy. A 21-foot Sea Ray boat I'd worked my tail off to buy. To me, that boat wasn't just fiberglass and a motor. It was freedom. Weekend getaways on Lake Hartwell, fishing trips with my son, nights anchored under the stars with a cold beer in hand. That boat was the payoff for years of overtime and skipped vacations. But apparently, to Karen, the self-appointed queen of our HOA, it was an eyesore. "Excuse me," a sharp voice called from across the street. I didn't even have to look up. I knew that voice like I knew the sound of nails on a chalkboard. Karen Whitmore, early 60s, pastel cardigans, perfectly trimmed bob, and a permanent scowl like someone stole her parking spot in life. "Morning, Karen," I said, forcing a polite smile as I turned off the hose. She stood there on her driveway, arms crossed like she was guarding the gates of heaven. "Do you know that parking a boat in your driveway is a violation of our HOA bylaws?" I took a slow sip of my coffee. "It's Saturday. I'm washing it before I take it out to the lake. I'll put it back in storage tonight." Karen's lips pursed so tight they could have cracked a walnut. "That's not the point. The rule clearly states." I held up a hand. "Karen, I've read the rule book. It says no long-term storage of recreational vehicles. This is temporary." She strutted closer, heels clicking on the pavement like gunshots. "Temporary or not, it ruins the aesthetic of the neighborhood. People pay good money to live here. They expect a certain standard." I couldn't help but laugh. "Karen, this neighborhood has 3 houses with Christmas lights still up from December, and it's April." Her eyes narrowed into slits. "Don't get smart with me, Jason. I'm filing a complaint." I watched her storm back to her house, her little white dog trotting behind her like a minion. My blood boiled, but I let it slide. I wasn't about to let some bored retiree ruin my Saturday. Or so I thought. By Monday, I had an email from the HOA board with the subject line, "Notice of Violation." I stared at the screen, jaw tight. According to the letter, I had 48 hours to remove the boat from the property or face a $250 fine. $250. For washing my own damn boat in my own damn driveway. I called the HOA office, got their voicemail, and left a message that was, let's just say, firmly worded. But by the time I got home from work, Karen was waiting on her porch like a vulture circling fresh roadkill. "You got the email?" she said sweetly, like she'd just offered me a plate of cookies. I clenched my teeth. "Yeah, real neighborly of you, Karen." She shrugged. "Rules are rules. You agreed to them when you bought the house." My hands curled into fists at my sides. Every instinct screamed to tell her exactly where she could shove those rules. But instead, I said, "Enjoy your evening," and walked inside. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a cold beer, staring out the window at that boat gleaming in the driveway. Karen wasn't just enforcing the rules, she was enjoying this. This was sport to her, and I wasn't about to lose. The next weekend, I made sure the boat was gone before sunrise. Hauled it to the storage lot, paid the fee, played by the book. But Karen? She wasn't satisfied. Oh no. She started nitpicking everything. My trash can placement. A tiny oil stain on the driveway. Even the length of my grass. Every time I thought I was in compliance, another email showed up. Another violation. It was like she'd declared war. And that's when I decided, if Karen wanted a war, she was going to get one. Only difference? I wasn't just going to win. I was going to make sure Karen regretted ever messing with me. What she didn't know was that I had an idea. A little loophole in the rules. And by the time I was done, that boat she hated so much, it was going to be her problem forever. But before we get there, you need to know just how far Karen was willing to go to make my life miserable. I thought Karen's crusade would end with that first complaint. I really did. But if I'd learned anything in the weeks that followed, it was this. Karen didn't just enforce the rules, she lived for them. It was her oxygen. The next blow came on a Wednesday evening. I pulled into my driveway after a long day at work, dreaming of nothing more than reheated pizza and a cold beer. But there it was, a bright yellow envelope taped to my front door like a scarlet letter. Violation notice. Improper trash can placement. I ripped it down and scanned the fine print. Apparently, leaving my trash can visible from the street for more than 24 hours after pickup was against neighborhood aesthetics. The trash company had been late that week, so the can sat out a little longer. Big deal. But the kicker? The fine was another $100. I looked across the street, and guess who was out there pruning her roses, pretending not to watch me? Karen. She didn't even try to hide her smug little grin. That night, as I sat at my kitchen table with the envelope in one hand and my beer in the other, I realized something. This wasn't just about a boat anymore. This was personal. Karen wanted to break me. She wanted me to wave the white flag and admit defeat. But I've never been the kind of guy to back down. The next morning, I pulled out my HOA handbook and read every page. Every boring, soul-sucking page of legalese. If Karen wanted to play by the rules, then fine. I'd learn them better than she ever could. And that's when I found it. The loophole. Buried in Section 14, subparagraph C, it said, detached structures for the purpose of storage or recreation are permissible upon approval from the HOA board, provided they meet setback and aesthetic guidelines. In other words, I couldn't park my boat in the driveway. But if I had a detached recreational structure on my property that was big enough to hold a boat, totally legal. I sat back in my chair, a slow grin spreading across my face. Karen wanted me to hide the boat? Fine. I'd build it a damn house. But before I started construction, I had to deal with Karen's constant harassment. The next 2 weeks were hell. One day, I came home to a note about the height of my grass. Must not exceed 3 inches. The next, it was a complaint about unapproved holiday decorations, a single string of lights I forgot to take down after my daughter's birthday party. Every time I saw Karen, she had that same smug look, like she thought she was winning. And every time, I forced a smile and said nothing. But inside, I was planning. I hired a contractor I knew from work, a guy named Rick who owed me a favor. We drew up plans for a detached boathouse. A legal, HOA-approved structure, complete with matching siding and a pitched roof to blend with the neighborhood. When I submitted the paperwork to the HOA, Karen lost it. I'll never forget the day I dropped off the application at the board meeting. Karen was sitting at the end of the table like a queen on her throne, pearl necklace gleaming, lips pursed so tight they could have sealed a Ziploc bag. "What is this?" she snapped, flipping through the papers. "My application for a detached recreational structure," I said, all smiles. "This is absurd. You can't. The bylaws say I can." I cut in. Section 14, subparagraph C. I followed the process. And since the design matches the neighborhood standards, there's no reason to deny it. Her face turned the color of an overripe tomato. "You're doing this to spite me." "No, Karen," I said, leaning in just enough for her to feel the heat in my voice. "I'm doing this because I like my boat." The vote wasn't unanimous. Karen fought tooth and nail, but the rest of the board approved it. She couldn't override them. And that's when the real fun began. Rick and his crew started work the next week. Every morning, the sound of hammers and saws echoed through the neighborhood. I made sure the guys parked their trucks right in front of Karen's house. She called the HOA. She called the city inspector. She even called the police once, claiming the construction was unsafe. Every time, they told her the same thing. It's legal. By the time the frame went up, Karen looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her blinds twitched every time I walked outside. She even started leaving passive-aggressive notes in my mailbox. "This is ruining our property values. You're destroying the character of the neighborhood." But me? I just smiled and waved every time I saw her. And here's the best part. This structure wasn't just a garage. It was a fortress. Reinforced walls, a custom lift system, climate control, the works. My boat was going to have a better home than half the people in this neighborhood. Karen thought she'd won when she got that first violation issued. She thought she could bully me into submission. But what she didn't realize was that this was just the beginning. Because when that boathouse was done, Karen was going to wish she'd never opened her mouth. And trust me, it wasn't just because of what I was building. It was because of what I was planning to do next. By the time summer rolled around, the boathouse was finished, and it was glorious. Matching vinyl siding, architectural shingles, a decorative cupola on top. It looked like something straight out of a home design magazine. The HOA had no choice but to approve it, and deep down, I think they even admired how well it blended with the neighborhood. But Karen? Karen was furious. She stood on her porch the day Rick's crew packed up their tools, glaring like a villain in some low-budget soap opera. I could almost hear the internal monologue. How dare he win? How dare he humiliate me like this? The next week, my mailbox was stuffed with letters, new HOA guidelines, vague threats about future policy updates, and of course, Karen's handwritten masterpiece, a 3-page rant about how I was degrading the integrity of the community. I laughed, crumpled it up, and tossed it in the trash. Karen wasn't used to losing, and losing this battle? It broke something inside her. She stopped pretending this was about the rules. She wanted revenge, and she was willing to go nuclear. I found out just how far she'd go one humid July morning. I was out front trimming the hedges when a white sedan rolled up. Out stepped a man in a city inspector uniform, clipboard in hand, badge clipped to his shirt. "Morning," he said, glancing at my boathouse. "You the homeowner?" "That's me," I said cautiously. "What's going on?" "Got a complaint about an unpermitted structure," he said, flipping through papers. "Anonymous call." I didn't even need to guess who made it. "Structures permitted," I said, walking him inside to show the documentation. "Stamped, signed, and blessed by your office." The guy skimmed the papers, nodded, and sighed. "Looks good to me. Sorry to waste your time. Happens more than you'd think." He left, and I looked across the street. There she was, Karen, peeking through her blinds like a raccoon in pearls. When she saw me wave the paperwork at her, she ducked out of sight. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the endless violations, the fines, the harassment. No, Karen had brought this on herself. And that's when I decided I wasn't done yet. Building the boathouse was just the first strike. What I did next, that was the knockout punch. It started with another deep dive into the HOA bylaws. I wanted to know every inch of what Karen loved so much, every line she thought gave her power. And then I found it. Another golden loophole, this time in the landscaping section. Any homeowner may install water features provided they do not exceed the property line and maintain drainage compliance. Water features, fountains, ponds, streams. And you know what pairs beautifully with a boathouse? A dock. That's right, I built a pond in my backyard. A big one. Lined it, filled it, landscaped it like a resort lagoon. And then, I extended a deck from my boathouse right onto the water so I could dock my Sea Ray on my own property. Legal. Perfectly within the rules. And absolutely infuriating for Karen. The construction took 3 weeks. Every day, she stood outside with her phone, snapping pictures like a wannabe paparazzo. She called emergency HOA meetings. She tried to get the city involved again. Nothing worked. My permits were airtight. When the pond was done, I invited a few friends over for a backyard party. Music playing, beers flowing, kids splashing in the water. And right there, tied to my brand new dock, sat the boat Karen hated more than anything in the world, gleaming in the sun like a middle finger in fiberglass. Karen watched from across the street, arms folded so tight I thought she might snap in half. Her face was a shade of red I'd never seen before, somewhere between fire truck and nuclear meltdown. And then came the moment that changed everything. She stormed over, heels stabbing the grass, voice shrill enough to pierce the music. "This is illegal. You can't do this. I'll have the HOA shut you down." Everyone turned to look. I stood there calm, beer in hand, smiling like the devil himself. "Karen," I said, holding up a thick binder of paperwork. "Every inch of this is legal. HOA approved. City approved. You can check for yourself." She snatched the papers, flipped through them, and realized the truth. She had nothing. This is ruining property values," she sputtered. "Funny," I said. "Rick's crew said projects like this actually raise property values." "You're welcome." Laughter rippled through the party. Karen's face twisted into something primal, pure, unfiltered rage. And then, for the first time, she lost control. She grabbed the nearest object, a lawn chair, and hurled it into my pond. Everyone froze. Karen gasped like she couldn't believe what she'd just done. And then, without a word, she turned and stormed off, her little dog yapping behind her. That was the day Karen crossed the line. And it was the day I realized this wasn't over. She was going to come after me with everything she had. What she didn't know was that I was ready for it. Because the next move, the one that would make this her problem forever, that was already in motion. After the chair-throwing incident, Karen vanished for a few days. No gardening, no morning walks, no passive-aggressive waves from across the street. It was almost peaceful, but peace never lasts with people like her. The HOA board called an emergency meeting the following week. Surprise, surprise, it was about me. I walked into that beige conference room at the community center to find Karen sitting at the head of the table, pearls gleaming under the fluorescent lights, lips pursed in that permanent scowl. She looked like a judge about to hand down a death sentence. "Mr. Taylor," she said, voice dripping with venom, "your recent additions have caused quite a stir in the community." I leaned back in the plastic chair, crossing my arms. "You mean my legal, permitted additions?" Her nostrils flared. "Your pond is a safety hazard. It attracts mosquitoes. Children could drown. And your so-called boathouse. It's an eyesore." "Funny," I said, smiling just enough to make her twitch. "Everyone else seems to love it. I've had neighbors asking for Rick's number." The other board members shifted uncomfortably. Most of them weren't bad people. They were just tired of Karen's power trips. "Well," Karen snapped, "we're drafting new rules to address these loopholes." I shrugged. "That's fine. Won't affect me. Everything I built is grandfathered in." The look on her face? Priceless. She knew I was right. The meeting ended with Karen fuming, and me walking out feeling 10 feet tall. But I knew this wasn't the last of it. Karen didn't quit. She obsessed. And sure enough, she came back swinging. 2 weeks later, I got a certified letter from the county. Anonymous complaint regarding unauthorized wetlands development. Wetlands. Karen had called the state environmental agency on me. Claimed my pond was destroying the ecosystem. A state inspector showed up in a green truck, clipboard in hand, and I gave him the grand tour. Showed him the permits. Showed him the drainage system I installed. Showed him the mosquito prevention measures. He left with a smile and a "nice work, man." Strike two, Karen. Then came the social media smear campaign. Karen started a Facebook group, Save Our Neighborhood. She posted pictures of my pond and boathouse with captions like, "Would you want to live next to this?" Problem was, most people did. The comments were full of neighbors asking how they could do the same. One guy even joked about starting a backyard yacht club. Karen was losing control. And when control freaks lose control, they get desperate. I didn't find out about her last move until I heard the sirens. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was out back, waxing the Sea Ray while my buddies grilled burgers. Suddenly, 2 squad cars rolled up, lights flashing. My heart skipped. Had Karen really called the cops? Yep. The officers walked up, looking embarrassed. "We got a call about illegal boat storage," one of them said, glancing at my dock. I handed them the permits. Showed them everything. They left shaking their heads, probably wondering why they'd been dragged into a neighborhood feud. Karen stood on her porch the whole time, arms crossed, smiling like a villain in a Disney movie. She thought this would scare me, but all it did was push me to finish my plan. The plan that would make this her problem forever. See, while Karen was busy wasting everyone's time, I was busy with the county property records. Did you know that in some counties, you can legally name a body of water? And that once it's on record, it becomes a permanent geographic feature? Yeah, so I filed the paperwork, paid the small fee, got the approval, and 2 weeks later, a little sign went up at the edge of my property. "Welcome to Karen's Lagoon." That's right, I named my pond after her. It was official. It was on county maps. It would be on Google Maps. Long after Karen sold her house, moved away, or keeled over from sheer bitterness, my backyard pond would still be called Karen's Lagoon. When the sign went up, Karen came storming over like a tornado in pearls. "You take that down right now," she shrieked. "Sorry, Karen," I said, sipping my beer. "It's official. Want to see the paperwork?" Her face turned purple. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Then she spun on her heel and marched back across the street, little dog scrambling to keep up. That was the last real interaction we had. She still glares at me from time to time, but she knows it's over. I won. And every time I take the boat out on the weekends, every time I sit on my dock with a cold drink and look at that sign, I smile. Because no matter what Karen does, no matter how many letters she writes or meetings she calls, my backyard will always be a reminder of the day she picked the wrong guy to mess with. And that reminder? That's her problem forever. If you enjoyed this intense story, smash that like button and subscribe for more gripping, cinematic tales. Don't forget to hit the bell so you never miss the next thriller. Your support keeps these stories coming.